for you. I can't turn it off. Hold on.
Once you turn
It's not bad.
You're going to be advertising Google for the rest of your life, I'm afraid.
Oh gosh.
You should have checked the terms of service. You'd have known.
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool.
Thank you very much for attending the meeting tonight. Please let me describe my understanding until today. I'm very interested in scalability, like everybody. Pardon. Sorry. Scalability is everybody's concern, and almost everybody is agree with increasing block size. And I have seen Epicenter Bitcoin and Let's Talk Bitcoin, and I was listening to Mike Hahn and Gavin Andreessen, and discussion between Gavin Andreessen and Peter Todd. And I was thinking that Gavin Andreessen has been quite reasonable, and especially after reducing 20 megabyte into 8 megabyte, I almost agree with Gavin's opinion, Gavin's understanding, Gavin's overview and the vision. But if after seeing Jerry's blog, I noticed that something is wrong with privacy and blacklisting some attackers' point. So now I think that everybody might be confused. At least I'm confused, and I'm saying I have seen many discussion which is criticizing Mike and Gavin and XT. So, and after seeing Jerry and Edmund and Ben's discussion on Twitter with Roger and Gavin and Greg Maxwell and Adam Back, I realized that discussion between Edmund and Jerry is very useful for Mike and Gavin and many miners in the world. So please let me understand Jerry and Edmund, how you are seeing the current situation and how you like to lead the environment. I guess that, Jerry, can you please briefly describe what you wrote on your influential blog?
Okay. Sure. Yeah. I think the blog. I think you posted a link to. It's called Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin: The Schism That Divides Us All. You did mention that there was some other issues with there were some other features of XT which was put in. Actually, I didn't mention any of that on my blog. I was the features about the IP quality sort of denial of service kind of defense, which could possibly be used as a censoring tool. Those things actually I didn't mention anything on my blog because I was kind of primarily focused on XT's block increase feature. And as you said, I think originally Gavin's 20 megabyte increase was a little bit probably extending a bit, given the lack of research that showed that it would be probably safe given the network effects, given the economic effects, given the game theoretic effects of the mining ecosystem. Since he reduced it down to 8, as I said in my article, it's probably okay. I don't really have that much of a problem with 8 megabytes. What I have more of a problem with is the way they're forcing a hard fork. Even though basically the way they're going about it. It's more of the change process, which they're actually taking part in right now, which is, if it works, it's going to set a very bad precedence. It's going to set the precedence that anytime you don't think that a feature is getting included in Bitcoin, basically just try to rally all the miners to support you and just like to move it over. So there are arguments that this is like the free market kind of like true public democracy way of doing things, which is fine. I do agree on a theoretical level that it is, I guess, more of a populist kind of strategy. But the unfortunate thing is, like right now, Bitcoin, only miners have a say. Nodes don't necessarily have a say. And because the demographic is kind of skewed in that way and biased in that way, then you really have kind of issues with more corruption issues. I mean, if a miner knows Gavin like he's his best friend, then he can convince several mining pools to do this or that, just because the mining pools aren't technical enough to understand this stuff, and they're just going to trust whatever core dev, whichever one of their friends core dev tells them. So I think that's kind of a dangerous precedence right now. I don't think Bitcoin's ready for that kind of populist democracy kind of system yet, and that's basically what I have a problem against. And quickly and technically, the only issue I have with the block increase is that it's automatic. I think maybe we should control it more. I don't believe an automatic schedule would suit, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years. I mean, Bitcoin's only been alive for 5. I can't really imagine how we can predict any sort of with any sort of regularity the increase of bandwidth that would kind of guarantee no potential problems. Now, unless we can show that potential problems are we're way below the threshold, which we don't know yet. But if we could show that, then maybe that's not a problem. But since we haven't shown that definitively, then it's kind of risky. And given the fact that we don't really need to increase right now, the limit has been hit. Nobody really panicked, and we don't really have a mass influx of transactions that are going to hit the network in the future, in the foreseeable future. I just don't see the rush. So that's my stance. I don't see the need for the rush, I suppose. So I think caution on the side, erring on the side of caution is probably better at this point.
So okay. I agree with you. Please go ahead, Edmund.
Yeah, I was just going to see if there's, just kind of see where our starting point is, to see if we agree on a couple of things. Do you think that this subject, the issue of raising the block size, is going to be to a certain extent kind of inherently controversial? I mean, I think you talked a bit in your post about there's kind of a tension between people who think that Bitcoin should be a payment system and people who think it should be a store of value, stuff like that. So now my view is that inherently it's going to be controversial. That even if you may be able to get all the core devs lined up behind an agreement, but there are going to be a lot of people who are going to disagree with that. Is that something you'd agree with, or do you think that I think Adam Back has been kind of pushing a slightly different line to the effect that basically everybody is going to ultimately agree. You just have to follow the process, and and then it'll all be sort of happiness and laughter. What's your take on that?
I guess I lean on the side that it will probably be controversial, but so this is kind of like why I wrote a second article, which is like my sort of take, kind of a draft. Obviously, I'm not the definitive view on this at all, but as an idea, I think we kind of need to define as a group, and when I mean a group, I mean users, miners, nodes, core devs, everybody. We're going to have to actually define a majority of what we think Bitcoin should be. Because, like you said, I mean, it could be controversial if some people think that Bitcoin should never be able to handle Visa's capacity, like never, versus the people who think that it should. If
right, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you just think that's just not an interesting goal for Bitcoin, yeah.
I think it is a goal, but I don't think that's the most high priority goal. So I'm happy if Bitcoin does Visa levels in 10 years, but it sounds like or maybe even 20 years. In that sense, I'm kind of aligned with Gavin. It'd be great if Bitcoin could do 50K transactions in 20 years. I'm kind of for that. I just don't like the fact that it's automatic scaling.
Right. Okay. So let me address a couple of points. One, why I think there's some urgency. So that's what I think quite a few people have been asking, and it's so my view of this is that right now Bitcoin has this very important network effect, and that's pretty much all Bitcoin has defending it is its moat. And it's quite a wide, deep moat. There's no point in using anything else if you can use Bitcoin. But that does mean that if we want to keep that network effect, when the market wants us to scale, if it's practical to scale, we need to do it, right? So now we don't quite know when the market's going to want us to scale. So we don't know, for example, for example, OpenBazaar, is hopefully fairly soon is going to be used. Well, that could be a very big hit, and that could be very important. There are a lot of other things that people are building, that they may just bomb, and it may be that we just carry on without, a lot of, without a huge, the kind of the current levels of fairly slow growth, or it may be that we get a lot of growth very quickly. But I think that when that growth does come, we need to be able to handle it. So that's my first point. So then my second point is, given that we need to be able to handle that growth if it comes, to the extent that these systems can handle them, obviously we don't want to kill the thing, but to the extent that they can handle them, we need to be able to handle it. The question is then, what does the process look like to do that in a hurry? Because part of the discussion was that I think Greg and Luke were suggesting that basically they could pretty much get a block size change out in a couple of weeks. That's what they were saying on the mailing list, and if that's correct, then you can see the argument that, well, maybe we wait to see a bit of that traffic coming, and maybe we just point people for 2 weeks because we can't handle their traffic. But then after that, we're going to make an increase, and I don't think that's realistic. When I look at the process that's involved in core making a decision, and then the process that's involved in actually getting that implemented by miners, it's not a smooth process, and it can take a long time when there are people out there who disagree. So just thinking back, one example that Bitcoin had was when we brought in P2SH. So the issue here was that a lot of people were losing money because they had it secured by a single private key, and we really wanted people to be able to use multi-sig, so that they could, have different keys in different places. You could have one on your normal computer, and you could have another one on an offline computer, and all this stuff. And to do that, it was just about possible to do it, but it was a lot easier with what ultimately turned out to be P2SH, this change. Now the introduction of that took, I remember because I was really waiting for this change to be able to build stuff on it, and it took months and months and months and months of discussion, and then most of the core developers agreed. Gavin pulled the change. Luke Jr. at the time didn't agree with the change. So he went and he made a campaign to the public and said, don't run this version. So you had the standard core version, which included P2SH, and then Luke Jr. went saying to people, well, this is a bad change, this shouldn't be in there. You should put no to P2SH in your block instead of having this thing that would have supported P2SH. And eventually P2SH got through, but it took a very long time. It took months and months and months of waiting, and during that time people were losing their bitcoins. Now, and by the way, Luke may have been actually right on the merits of, he had a different proposal that was maybe on merits a better proposal, but these things can take a very long time. Now that was basically just an argument about the syntax in the scripting language. There was nothing fundamental about that at all. There were no serious, fault lines about these people want a storage system, and these people want, a store of value, and these people want a fast transaction system. Yeah. These people want to compete with Visa. It was really a very simple syntax argument. It's a developer's argument about syntax, and it took months and months. So now, if you look at the block size issue, there are people out there who think that if you raise the block size, you will ultimately end up raising the number of bitcoins issued. Okay? John Mattoni thinks that, quite well respected in the community. There are people out there who, well, ask him, but there are people, or read his tweets, but there are people out there who think that transaction scarcity is an important part of the economic model of Bitcoin. I don't know if you read the original hard fork missile crisis post. If you Google it up, it'll come up. about the hard fork missile crisis. This was Mircea Popescu, who runs the MPEX exchange, and he has this whole kind of tribe of guys who follow him, right? And he said very early on, if you have an increase to the block size, I'm not going to count that as money. Okay, so now those are some fairly extreme examples, but also not all that out of the Bitcoin mainstream. And then you've got people in the core development team who really are not particularly convinced of, are certainly not convinced of what we think is generally true, that 8 megabytes seems basically okay. And people, Luke Jr. thinks that it just encourages people to put spam in there. The most aggressive proposal we've seen right now from the core team, has been the 2 megabyte rise in quite a distant date. Ultimately, how far does it go? It's like 4 megabytes it caps out at, and even that hasn't got
0.4% a year or something.
Right. And even that hasn't got, okay, I would support that from even the core developers, right? Now then you look at, so now I'm just going to get onto the process, and then I'll just say a little bit about the process, and then
Can I just address the analogies that you made there? I think those analogies are not necessarily that valid, because I can see how a discussion or a very long debate would happen if you're discussing a new syntax in the scripting, in the transaction processing scripting language like P2SH. That kind of is, you can open up, logic bombs and all sorts of like nasty stuff in there. So that is the part of the code where you should be arguing syntax for like a month. That
wasn't the argument.
Oh, okay.
The argument wasn't that you could open up logic bombs. The argument was that it was not pretty, and it's absolutely right. Actually, it's hideous.
Okay.
But that was it. I mean, that was all it was about. It was that it was kind of nasty and smelly. It wasn't that, and it was. I mean, Luke Jr. actually wanted a much more. The argument, Luke Jr. wanted a much more expansive thing that would have been kind of more expressive and allowed you to do a lot more than what that very limited P2SH proposal did. So yeah.
Fair enough. The one that's not a bit yet, the one which is like increasing to 2 megabytes and then it's slow increase. Any sort of auto increase schedule is going to have a lot of mulling and hemming and humming. Any sort of auto increase, which is the reason why, although I like Garzik's bit 100. I would put my vote for it, but I can see how other people would argue that it does change the network economic dynamics, because now miners are voting and things are going to automatically change. Once the miners have that control, then it becomes a game theoretic, sort of like a competition that who's going to figure out how to game it first. So although the core one doesn't have that because miners don't have control, it still is a schedule. So it's a little bit tougher problem, I can see, although they are taking a while on this. Now, but back to the reason why you brought this up. I do believe that a simple block increase to 2 megabytes can be done in 2 weeks. I absolutely believe that. That's not even any code that needs to be pretty. It is literally one line. There's one line that says block header limit equals 1.
Well, that's not quite true, because you also need the thing that brings it in. So you need all Gavin's kind of voting code and stuff.
No, I'm talking about an emergency fork. I'm talking if the limit is hit extensively, such to the point where transaction fees are going up to the roof, and then people are complaining everywhere on Reddit, then all the core devs have to go like, okay, dude, we're just pushing it out to fix, just like we did when they pushed the fix for the bug, when the F2 pool had a bug. They pushed the fix in 2 days. And so all they have to do is just make that one line change, pull it, and then call up like all the 5 mining pool operators in China, tell them all to upgrade. It's literally going to be done in like maybe maximum 3 days. And maybe they're going to be safe and they're going to wait until the next difficulty change. So maybe that's why they said 2 weeks. I don't know. But I don't have doubt that they can do that really fast. Now, whether or not they're going
to... So in that situation now, you've got everybody who's got an unupgraded Bitcoin node out there, has now got this thing that's seeing this other little fork and thinks that all our regular blocks are invalid.
Well, it has to be coordinated, and I guess that's what will take the longest part of it. But it won't be a debate amongst core, is what I'm trying to say. It'll be more of a rollout implementation of calling BitPay, calling Coinbase, calling like the miners, and then doing that. And it's going to be a logistic problem, not a debating problem, because if the limit is getting hit and it's obviously hurting, right? It's obvious. It's no longer a contentious hard fork.
Okay, hang on a minute. Here's the problem. How do we define hurting? Because the fundamental problem is that for some people, hurting is transactions are very expensive. You can't get an upgrade, or people it's not interesting to use OpenBazaar, for example. That some people consider hurting. Other people consider that to be a feature, right? Because a lot of people want a fee market where fees go fairly high. So it doesn't strike me that we've got a common definition of hurting. That's the first half of the problem. The second half of the problem is it's not just an argument among the core 5 guys, right? So if you read, for example, Peter's post to the emailing list about he kind of sets out his position on this, right? And he's written this post where he says really, he doesn't think that the core developers have the authority to be making a controversial change. Okay, he thinks that it's not just up to them. If there's controversy beyond those 5 guys, then it shouldn't happen, right? Now, if he thinks that, and he says no, then there's also now no consensus within the top with those 5 guys, so they can't pull it.
Well,
right?
well, we have to start somewhere. I mean, we have to kind of agree it, and we have to sort of establish that we all agree that everybody in the ecosystem doesn't want Bitcoin to die. I mean, we have to at least start at that base, right?
Well, you can agree with you don't want it to die, but what the kind of crisis or the kind of very damaging, what I think and I think you think are very damaging conditions are things that a lot of people out there think are desirable conditions, right? So people are competing for space. The prices of transactions have gone up a lot. That will lay the ground for all these off-chain solutions that people have been. And by the way, I mean we're not just talking about Lightning, right? So if you go back to 2013, go to Bitcoin Talk, and have a look at Peter Todd's video opposing block size increase, and he's been absolutely consistent about this since 2013. He made this video designed to appeal to the masses, right? It's not a technical thing for core developers. It's designed to appeal to masses. And what he's advocating in that video is that instead of using on-chain solutions, you use off-chain solutions which are centralized, like Coinbase.
Sure.
So that's before people were talking about Lightning. He was suggesting that even when nobody was even talking about Lightning existing, it would be more desirable if Bitcoin was a very limited settlement system, and the transactions were elsewhere, right?
Well, I mean, he's been consistently a pro-decentralization guy, but I wouldn't hold anybody to anything that they wrote 2 years ago.
No, but he's still saying exactly. I mean, well, he's no longer saying that it should be Coinbase. He's now saying we'll use Lightning. But the point that I'm making is that, and he's been absolutely consistent with his position.
Yep.
The point that I'm making is that fees going up, the kind of thing that to OpenBazaar kind of having a lot of problems, the kind of thing that we think are broken, he would not consider broken. He would consider the system functioning correctly. So, and it's not just a matter of waiting for Lightning. That's his view, and it may be right. I mean, I'm not. I don't mean to kind of say this guy's an idiot. I mean, I do take what he says seriously. He may be right, but that's his view. So it's not correct to say that everybody out there is just going to say, okay, I agree, this is non-controversial. Right? The situations that to us make it appear that Bitcoin is broken, to those guys, to a significant, it's a minority, but it's a significant vocal minority, including some very smart people. Sure. They think that sticking at 1 megabyte, just going through the pain of not having enough transactions, they think that is the best behavior. This is not going to happen in a hurry.
maybe not in a hurry, and I don't think there's a hurry as well. But I'll say two things to that. Regardless of what they think, we do need people of all sorts of views. That's what.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you need someone like him who thinks maybe we should stay to 1 megabyte forever. But regardless of what he may have said, may continue to think today.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, the entire world is asking for a block increase. It doesn't matter what he thinks now. It's going to increase. It's just a matter of when. It will increase. I mean, if it doesn't increase, then the next, give it 6 months, or if it looks like Core is obviously dragging their feet, do you think that they would be able to keep another fork from happening? I mean, if XT is squashed, we wait a year later, there's no way they're going to stick with Core if they haven't pulled something out of their butt by then. So it doesn't really matter what they think. They're not gods. We should not really harp on every Core developer's kind of personal views. I honestly didn't even know most of their views.
No, I'm not at all saying this as a criticism of Peter Todd, who, like I say, I'm glad that he's working on Bitcoin, and I mean, Reality Key is actually my business is based kind of partly on a Peter Todd idea. I do take his views very seriously. I'm just making the point that there is no scenario where an increase to the block size from 1 megabyte in the next 2 years is uncontroversial.
I'll tell you. I'll make it really, really easy. This is literally.
Okay, no scenario is probably an exaggeration, but go on.
This is literally everything you said is correct. It's a lot of complex stuff going on, but I'll boil it down to one metric. All right, one metric which will make it a universal thing. If the block size limit was hit, right? I don't care what the miners want. Yeah, maybe some are wanting some fees a little bit more, but eventually they're going to start worrying. You know what's going to trigger it all? The price dropping like about $100. They'll push some change. That's it. I don't give a shit about all the other magic politics stuff in the background.
Here's the problem, though.
They'll push
Here's the problem. So think about this scenario, right?
Yep.
Everybody's saying Bitcoin is really cool.
Yep.
There's all this cool new stuff you can do in Bitcoin.
Yep.
People are making transactions. The blocks are full. The wallets are kind of adjusting. That'll probably work. Probably might Hearn's not right. They're probably kind of adjusting.
Yep.
It's probably not all falling over. But fees are going up, and certain use cases are getting priced off the chain. Some of those use cases we think are very important, and other people don't. It's not obvious that in that situation the price drops right away. But here's what happens. Those use cases go somewhere else. Right? So all the people who are being priced off the chain, we're closing our shop, we're saying, you're not coming in, I'm sorry, we're full. Okay? They're going down the street, they're going somewhere else. That somewhere else, whatever, some other coin or whatever it is,
let's go to a sidechain.
I can't have a sidechain. I don't think that works yet, but anyway. So wherever they're going, and a sidechain is just as bad for centralization as. But anyway, just to finish my point. So they're going off to some other coin. That other coin is gradually getting momentum, but it doesn't have much of a network effect yet. It's only doing these piddly little transactions. Maybe all the grand high rolling transactions. They're still on Bitcoin. But what we're doing is we're taking away the Bitcoin network effect and we're gradually moving it over to this other coin, okay, which has decided it's going to scale, okay? Now, now this is the classic. If you read, for example, Clayton Christensen on how, or he's talking about companies, but on how companies get disrupted, this is exactly how it happens. So what happens is that you've got a very strong, dominant position, okay? You've got a lot of advantages, you've got a big moat, you've got all the top-end business. And then somebody comes along and they start taking the bottom-end business away from you. And you think, well, that's not so bad, right? There's not much money in it, we've still got all this top-end stuff. You keep on focusing on your best customers so you can serve higher margins. This is how but gradually the bottom, from nibbling at the bottom end, this other thing keeps gaining.
Yep.
And then by the time, there is a point at which the incumbent realizes that it's got a problem and it needs to respond. But by the time they do, it's game over. And that has happened over and over and over again with all kinds of companies, all kinds of businesses.
Yeah.
And so this is the amazing thing about Bitcoin right now, is to people outside the Bitcoin world, It's this kind of edgy kind of new disruptive technology. But if you look at how we're behaving, we're acting like a stodgy old incumbent. And there are all these guys nipping at our heels who nobody's taking any notice of because they don't have anything going because we can take all the business. But they're there and they're waiting for us to turn customers away, you know.
I think we found the core of our fundamental disagreement. I am of the belief that Bitcoin is not a company. It is not a technology. It is a money. And I do not believe that. I believe there is room, and that is the future. Probably the best future vision is to have Bitcoin as the most secure chain, and to have small other chains of coins, maybe connected via side chains, maybe not. But you have very like specific feature chains. For instance, maybe there's a chain for yen coin or something like that.
You know that if they're connected, if they're merge mined by Bitcoin miners, then all of the problems that you were talking about with scaling Bitcoin, they're all still there.
I'm not talking about merge mining. I'm talking about like you look at like the whole like the people in the world who are in crypto. There is still a lot of capacity for new miners using different mining algorithms. You know, even like Ethereum. You know, all these different types of cryptos which can be attached to Bitcoin, which do not have the same level of security. What would get me worried as Bitcoin? You know, if Bitcoin's existential risk would be if Bitcoin lost the more minor security hash power. So I guess that's what I think core devs should be watching the most.
So but again, this is and this is I'll type his name into the chat actually. I know Bitcoin's not a company, but all these all this stuff really applies. So if you read if you listen to Clayton Christensen, what you just said, where you lose the hash power, that's exactly the point where the game is already over. When you've lost the hash power, you've already lost.
Maybe, but I really don't see how we can have one network do all transactions, have all robots talk to themselves, have everybody on the planet Earth buy everything during the day, with money. I don't see that. I don't see that. And I mean, it could happen. We could do that. I mean, well, actually we can't because our technology today is Visa's the best, and it only does 50K, 60K maybe. But let's say in 20 years we can do 100K, which would be enough transactions for 3 people for everybody in the 5 billion people in the world. 3 transactions a day.
Yeah.
That cannot be a decentralized system, and I believe then that ends up killing the whole point, which is what makes Bitcoin have value right now. Bitcoin has
so that this is our next area of disagreement, right? So now I guess this is kind of distinct from the question of should you scale it automatically or should you rely on a governance process to scale it. I guess we haven't gone much into that issue, but the question is of does getting up to that scale sound feasible? And I think actually it does. I mean, if you look, so where we talked about Visa scale, I mean, it's so basically that's more or less where we get in 20 years if we follow Gavin's curve, right? It gets you to more or less current Visa scale, which is still a little bit small, but then it's not very far off getting you. Once you get that far, a few more doublings will get you a lot of transaction processing. Now, so I guess we should talk about kind of one of the substantial issues on the technology, which is, so your thought is, if we get to that level on that time scale, then it's not a decentralized system. And that doesn't strike me as correct. Firstly, because I took issue with some of the stuff you said on your blog, where you say that, for example, you make this kind of very clear linkage between bigger blocks and selfish mining being easier, which strikes me as not really justified by any argument, any logical argument, or any simulation that anyone's made.
That's a big thing. You're saying everything is bullshit. You're saying definitively that network propagation will not exacerbate the problem. Are you saying
I don't know definitively that it won't exacerbate the problem, but you're making a much bolder claim, which is
that's a much bolder claim, that it will probably not be an issue. When Satoshi clearly said, if you read Satoshi's paper, where in his function of the probability of a double spend, where is the variable that points network propagation? Where? You won't find it, because there's no variable. He assumes that there's no network delay. So
in his calculation, he doesn't, in the system design, he doesn't assume that. He assumes maybe we're going to have, a minute of orphan. We're going to have maybe 1 in 10 blocks getting orphaned or something.
Right. So that's why I said in the article, all I'm saying is that it will increase your effective hash rate. Yeah. I'm not saying that the world will end because of selfish miners. I'm saying that Satoshi's calculations need to be recalculated. They will be
Satoshi's
51% no longer 51. Maybe it's 45 now, or maybe it's 40, or who knows? Like basically, your effective hash rate is effective, and therefore your probability guarantees are changed. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. So
hang on a minute. They're not necessarily changed in that at the time when Satoshi released, you had lower. Well, okay, when he originally released, there were no transactions, but in the early days of Bitcoin, there were a low number of transactions, but there was also quite slow networks. And then gradually networks have been getting faster, and the number of transactions has been growing.
I don't know about that. I don't think.
I don't know what the ratio is, but put it this way. So he's got some calculations in that paper that assume a spherical cow, right? That assume immediate network propagation, but that doesn't mean that his system was designed as if there was going to be zero network propagation. If he'd been designing as if there was going to be instant network propagation, then you wouldn't need a 10-minute block interval. The whole point of having a 10-minute block interval is it takes a bit of time for blocks to propagate, so you need to keep that orphan rate down to a reasonable level.
Yes. Basically, he said like probably 10 minutes is stable enough.
That's right. And I think someone was saying he thought it would be like 1 in 10 blocks or something getting orphaned, so maybe 1 minute to propagate. So it's not like it undermines any of the assumptions that he's making. But what you say is true, that if you have slower propagation, then you have a higher orphan rate. And also there are some elements where if you have bigger blocks and slower propagation, there are some situations where, in theory, that could have a negative effect on miner centralization, which is your central claim. But you're going further, because you're not just saying there could be negative effects. You're saying growing at this rate is not compatible with having a decentralized system, and that is a much bolder claim that you're making there, and that's the claim that I think is wrong.
It is pushing it because so if you take it to infinity, imagine the exact argument I made in the article was not 8 megabyte blocks. I clearly said that was fine, and that means it probably won't affect anything in terms of decentralization. Right. What I said, which clearly going to affect decentralization, is if you have infinity-sized blocks, no limit. Yeah?
There's no proposal to do that, right?
But there has been people throwing that around.
Right, maybe. Okay. Some people have said that, but because they think that miners will be motivated to keep the things small themselves, not because they're advocating infinity.
Exactly. So that was the context which I said, like, look, if you limit, that's obviously bad and obviously centralized. So somewhere between here and there is a match point which we don't know, which we need to find, which we can hit. And we need to find out what that point is. And then I'm happy to go anywhere up until not exceeding that point. And that point may move, because that point is going to change how the network changes. So we need to model this somehow. And I think this is where Ben was talking about earlier. So that's what I mean. It would be obviously it's great to have more information. So if people can do simulations and can do tests, then that's all very useful. I think so. We were kind of having this discussion on Facebook that it's quite difficult to model all this stuff accurately, particularly because this is you can do these simulations on if we've got this bit of hash power partition from this bit, then this is what happens on these numbers, which is useful and interesting, and doing that to me hasn't given us anything that supports kind of this central claim that miners are incentivized to make enormous blocks to kill off the small ones, which I think is another kind of central claim here, that you're going to have
selfish mining is going to become much easier, right? That's kind of one of your main claims, right?
Well, and people just share bandwidth. I mean, they'll just share nodes. I mean, they're already starting to do that because they're just trying to get an advantage in starting to mine the next block. So they're just doing SPV mining sometimes.
Well, they're doing SPV mining, which is fine.
So I mean, you see the miners, that's their incentive. And so if you give them now the incentive, if they have a crappy internet connection, then I'm going to be a miner. I'm going to basically just pool together 3 miners in China because we can't afford the big satellite uplink or whatever, or fiber line. And now we can if we pool together. So here's kind of like, I think we kind of agree on the general environment. Here's kind of my proposal, which is not a BIP, which I haven't heard anyone say before.
Yeah.
Like, there is a magic point. We don't know where this point is. And we all kind of agree that researching and modeling the system is kind of hard. So why don't we do what TCP/IP does? You increase it maybe every 2 years, or you increase it by some, if the limit is getting past 75% full for the last X amount of time, or X maybe 6 months or something like that, then bump it up another like 2 times. And you keep doing that until either orphan rates come up or the mining hash rate distribution starts getting wonky, right? I mean, you can watch it every day to see how the mining hash, the breakup of the thing. If it starts clumping together, then, now here's the key, it has to be automatically scaled back, double, right? So you double, and then, or maybe you multiply by 1.5, 1.5 over every time, but after you see something bad going on, you reverse it by half. You chop it back.
So there's a suggestion like that in Ethereum that they're talking about targeting orphan rates. But it's much easier for them in Ethereum to target orphan rates because they actually track orphans.
They have the uncle.
They have the uncle thing, right? Yeah. So now I do kind of agree in that I think that Gavin's proposal is probably not the optimal possible thing, So I like the look of at least the general concept behind what Jeff Garzik suggested, where he's doing kind of miner voting. Now, obviously, that doesn't help if you think that kind of miners are the enemy that we're trying to defend against. But
that's what a lot of people say.
Which a lot of people think.
I don't like it though.
Right. So I don't know if it's. I doubt that would get through the. Actually get consensus if that's the goal, but just looking at the proposals on their merits, there was that suggestion which I thought was interesting. Another suggestion that might actually go somewhere is what Greg Maxwell's been talking about, where you target either something like block size or UTXO balance, because it might be actually bandwidth isn't the issue, but RAM is the issue. Anyway, you target whatever you're trying to target, and you raise the block difficulty a little bit if you want to make a big block in those terms, and you lower it a bit on a small block. Those are kind of I think very interesting proposals. But then I just come back to how long we've been talking about this since 2011, pretty much.
That's true.
We've been fighting about this since 2013 in a big way.
But only geeky people have been talking about it up until the last 2 months, honestly. So I honestly believe that this time we'll get action, and if this time doesn't get action, then I'll be on the next train for XT. I tell you. but everything in the past.
But I mean, you can kind of look at the game theory the other way, right? That if you want to make sure that there's action, if you run XT, and it doesn't come in till January, so.
No, this is a kind of exactly why I think there's some conspiracy theorists guys who are saying maybe Gavin is actually faking, like doing this to cause action, and then the next was actually going to trigger. He just pull back last minute and say like, all right, guys, or basically he's just doing this to just force. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's a bit of both, but the other I'm sure there's a bit of both, But it's certainly the fallback position will certainly be to actually make the change. But the key thing is that if Core come up with a lot of the arguments I think that people are having is actually, do we really think that Core are going to come up with something realistic by the end of the year or some reasonable time frame or not? And in a sense that doesn't matter. Like I think they're probably not unless the XT push makes them do it. And some people think, yeah, they are. They were just going through the process and they're giving everything full consideration. They were going to come up with a realistic proposal, and never mind what they've said on the public mailing list. And okay, sorry, that's I'm snarking. But they were going to do this. But in a sense, it doesn't matter in that if Core do come up with a workable proposal with a meaningful raise that doesn't look like it's just stalling, by the end of the year, XT is dead. Right? Nobody is going to run. I don't think we'll see a lot of. I certainly don't think we'll see miners picking up on the thing in a big way. Before the deadline is close, before the end of the year. I don't know if they ever will. I'm not convinced. Even if Core say no raise, I'm not convinced that XT will actually work. But but basically, Core can neutralize this thing at any time between now and then. So if anybody thinks that Core are going to act on this, they were always going to act. Gavin is just being a pain in the ass. If anyone thinks that, you don't need to worry, because once Core acts, nobody, even if Gavin still said my thing is wonderful, you should run it, nobody is going to. Like I say, I don't really think that's the situation, but I may be pleasantly surprised. Can I just add one extra point, kind of going back to the process, to something that we were talking about right at the beginning, which is slightly related. Which is that so what you were saying was that you don't think that you don't like the process where if you can get the miners to agree to something, you can get it adopted. And tell me if I'm kind of misparaphrasing. And so that's leaving out all of the other stakeholders, right? The regular users and everybody else in the ecosystem. They're all doing what somebody persuaded the miners to do. And that gives the miners too much power, and also the people persuading the miners too much power, which is a really bad precedent. I'm not kind of misphrasing what you said, right?
No, I think that what's bad is I don't think Gavin's been actually approaching miners. I think it was kind of the opposite.
No, I think he has.
Oh, yes?
I'm sure he has. I'm sure he has. I'm sure at least he wouldn't have done it without sounding them out on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He must have sounded. He must have sounded with them, and then they kind of agreed, and yeah. So basically, it's all kind of like lobbying the miners. I kind of feel that that the payment processor exchanges should actually have some sort of say in it, or anybody who runs a node should have some sort of say in it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, and this is the one negative thing about BIP 100. It's kind of unfortunate because if we kind of like ratify this thing, where only miners can control the block limit, we're never going to get that power back. Never. So it's kind of
we could lock them out, but we'd have to checkpoint and all this nasty stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or change the proof of work or something.
Exactly. Sorry, you're gonna have to buy new money.
That would get their attention. But what I would say though is that I think, and this relates to what I was earlier, I think that it's going to be very hard for Bitcoin XT to actually get miners to switch over. And if they do, it's not just going to be, they're not going to do this against the wishes of the rest of the ecosystem. Because what miners are doing, they're in the business of making Bitcoins, and then they sell those Bitcoins to somebody. So they want the Bitcoin certainly to have a high value, and then they want the person who they go to buy it to accept it. Yeah. So they need to sell it to exchange, and that exchange is an exchange. It's people exchanging. You need somebody to want those Bitcoins. Yeah. So the miners in this situation, they're kind of like the queen in a constitutional monarchy, right? So below the Queen, there are members of Parliament, and the Queen, in theory, has power to do all kinds of things, right? She can say off with his head, but in practice, she knows that if she starts randomly, taking over counties and executing people, then they're going to get rid of her. So she's constrained by the level below her, which is sort of Parliament and the government. Parliament and the government, in turn, they're members of Parliament. They so now the Queen maybe does have in some situations does have some discretion, but it's not kind of absolute. And then below that there's the government and the MPs, and they've got a certain amount of discretion again, but they're also constrained by the people who vote for them. And so sometimes they care about it enough that they'll kind of go against the specific opinion of some of the voters, right? And there's a certain amount of kind of give and take, but they also then don't have free rein to do whatever they like. And I think we're in the same situation here. So miners aren't going to move without the exchange and the payment processors. exchange and payment processes aren't going to move unless at least there's a reasonable consensus of the users agreeing to this. So I don't think that, I think that in a way this is quite an exceptional situation where there's this very fundamental argument which isn't really going to get resolved, at least certainly without that pressure, and maybe even with that pressure, wasn't going to get resolved by the processes that core has. Even if usually they're probably pretty good processes, for making sure that something stupid doesn't get pushed. Have just 5 guys and everybody has to agree. If it's a minor thing, or if it's not an intrinsically controversial thing, then that works pretty well. I think that's probably a good system. But I think it's not good at handling these controversial cases.
Yep.
So in that situation, the alternative that we have in Bitcoin is probably going to function pretty well. It's so you need basically a super minority of users to want this thing, or the exchange and payment processes won't go with it. You need basically a super majority of exchange and payment processes to go with it, or the miners won't go with it. I think there are actually reasonably good checks and balances in the system. That's also actually probably too many in that it probably won't work. I think they probably won't run Bitcoin either, but we'll see.
I guess in theory, I think it would be sufficient, but I think in practice the problem is it's kind of like a silent vote without anybody checking the ballot box. So that's the kind of problem that I see currently, which I don't know how we're going to solve. But if there was some way that everybody can send a vote to vote for whatever, whether you're a user, an exchange, everybody who runs a node, so that users they don't count. But if you run a wallet which uses a node, then that wallet's node gets to pick. Like Airbits gets to pick. Mycelium gets 1 vote. So if everybody could vote, everybody with a node could vote in one way silently, and it could be done automatically, then I think we have the governance problem next. But the problem is right now nobody knows who's voting, and everybody's just saying, "Oh yeah, we support it, yeah." And then another person comes on and says, "That guy was lying to you, man. He was totally bullshitting you." And be like, "Oh, yo, man, yeah, we're not supporting. And so it's kind of like just insane chaos where it's just like a big Gallup poll. And I don't even trust the stats anymore. I mean, half of the stats for XT running nodes are probably the fake XT node.
That's right. So that's right. Well, this is the fundamental reason why we have proof of work, right?
Exactly.
It is because there's no way to tell who is real.
Exactly.
So the only way Bitcoin has of identifying you or an actual person is hash power. So that's why hash power is the monarchy, because it's the only way that you can actually measure consensus.
And this is exactly something like somebody brought up, was that they were saying, yeah, this is exactly what proof of work is supposed to fix. I was like, no, proof of work fixes everything when we don't have a hard fork. Once we have a hard fork, all guarantees of Nakamoto consensus goes out the door, and we fall back to regular, plain and simple human politics and human democracy. I mean, if you can call it a democracy.
Well, I don't know. I think that's what's going on. That's driving where the proof of work goes. Right. But the proof of work is kind of the translation layer that translates this very kind of vague, spongy human political consensus or non-consensus
proof of work
into something that a computer can understand of this is the longest chain or this is the longest chain.
Yeah. But proof of work is kind of like, well, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, now there's the deadline January 11th. You can kind of think of that as an election day. On that election day, we'll actually get the ballot. But up until, not including election day, it's all bullshit we have to wade through. Everybody's just probably lying to each other in multiple levels. So since nobody knows who's voting, the only way they can gauge is like, oh, hey, are you going to support it? Oh, you're going to support it? Maybe I should support it too then. Oh, but what if they were lying?
I mean that's what will ultimately happen, right? Is that the miners. So probably the payment process and the exchanges will make statements, and maybe the miners will call them up and say, "Are you sure?" Seriously, because you're going to be a little bit nervous. I mean, if you imagine a few people out there are a little bit nervous about, okay, what happens if I spend my coin and then the thing goes the other way, and if you imagine if you're the miners, you're probably very nervous. They're probably the most nervous people here.
Yeah.
They really don't want to screw this up. So I don't think that they're going to take this decision rashly, and I don't think they're going to take this decision, against the you know, the general consensus of opinion, and you know, or at least, and I actually think that it needs kind of quite a strong consensus of opinion to even move them. So I think there's a kind of a practical kind of supermajority requirement in there, in the consensus system.
There's actually the danger I see is that it's not going to be a very clean election. This is going to be like a it's more going to be like a George Bush Florida, because I've already seen chats where people are already like thinking of ways to make money out of this fork. Basically, miners can basically say they're supporting something and just not.
Yeah, well, I've seen that stuff. I'm not really convinced. I mean, I think the key thing about this is if you get 75% in support.
Yeah.
Like I say, this is a very high hurdle. I know it sounds like, oh, there's 25% left who are against, but this is quite a high hurdle to have 75% in favor of, not just in favor of the change. That would already be quite a high hurdle, but not just in favor of the change, but in favor of the change so much and with so little confidence that Core are going to sort it out that they're prepared to run this alternative version, you know, managed by Mike Hearn, right? And in sort of that they're prepared to kind of put their necks above the parapet and do this. It's a high hurdle. So what that means is, if you've got 75% of the people who are prepared to put their heads above the parapet in support of XT, you probably haven't got 25% who are virulently against. There are probably some people in between, right? If you've got 75% who are so in favor of XT, of the big blocks, that they'll run XT, there are probably 15% who are kind of, well, I don't know.
I don't know.
And even if there weren't, it's pretty clear once you hit 75% and the exchanges are on board and the payment processes are on board, there's really very little incentive to keep on mining the old thing.
Let's imagine a situation where there's at least one payment processor which is still running Core, and you get 75, and it's past January 11th.
You won't get 75%.
It's past January 11th, and 75% of the last 1,000 blocks are mined by XT.
Yeah.
Now, 25% of those hashing power miners can then immediately switch back to Core and then dominate the Core chain, also making it the longest chain now because it has the more hashing power, well, like 30%. 30%. So now they have 50%. They have just increased their effective hash power distribution in the now winning chain, which is Core, and they just sell out to that exchange. All the exchanges will realize that the XG chain is actually just dropped after it flipped over. It flipped over, and then all of a sudden it dropped. The exchanges will flip, and now you've just killed XT. And the only people they screwed was the poor miners who weren't in on that.
They screwed them for about 3 blocks until they realized what's going on, right? So it's not like they made a huge killing on this, but okay, maybe there's a way they can actually get some money out. But let me just finish the point that I spoke for about 5 minutes without making, without getting to. So if you get 75% positively in favor of XT, that they would even run Mike Hearn stuff to support the big block thing, then at that point, you've then got 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, more than 0 of the remaining hash power is going to switch to XT or to bit 101. Right? Probably nearly everybody is going to switch because you've got this, you know, and the exchanges are on board and everybody's on board. You know, that's in that situation, pretty much everybody is going to switch. You've got to be really very, very ideologically opposed, or you just didn't get round to it. But either of those are not going to be very large numbers. So in practice, on that switch date, you're looking at certainly more than 99%. If anyone wants to like bet on this, by the way, I'd be very interested. You know, there's certainly going to be more than, if this happens, certainly meaning more than 90% on that switch date running the new version, and probably more like 95, could even be 98. So in that situation, going back to your attack, right? Let's imagine that you were the 25 who was playing games. You've just triggered the fork. Oops. and you've now got the other. So you had 25%. You have 25%. It hit 75. You switch back. You've triggered the fork, but there's now the extra 15-20% on the XT side, and you've just put yourself on the minority side, and now you're going to get your blocks off. It's not a realistic thing, you know.
I don't know. It's that's where we'll have to see, because that crystal ball is very fuzzy, and like the mechanics there. I'm not as confident as you that the entire network will flip very quickly within 2 weeks, because I believe if they're not flipping, then it's going to be ideological, and you're not going to get people who are acting on an ideological basis to change their mind. Like,
no, these guys are running businesses, right? We're not talking about.
I agree. But they're also running businesses which do they want to really bank their entire future of their business on, Mike Hearn? Like, which pretty much is going to be Mike Hearn's. They run Core's code again at that point, right? So Core will pull the thing and they'll run it. So, I don't know. So we'll see. It all just kind of boils down to politics now. Who's going to do the most convincing with the miners. That's what's going to bother.
That's pretty much. But below that, it's who's going to get certainly the exchange and the payment process. Basically all of the substantial kind of interest groups here have a veto.
The big.
Until you get to and the hardest one is the miners, actually. I think, just because they don't like to stick their heads out and take a stand on these things.
It is kind of like a problem where it's what is it like when you stand on the edge of a cliff with all your buddies and you go like, okay, who's going to jump first? All right, we're going to jump together.
Yeah, right. That's
jump together,
thing.
right?
Yeah. That's right. It's probably the sea's okay. It's probably not too rocky.
Yeah, and then let everybody else go, and you push your buddy down. So
right.
Let's be the first one down, right?
Yeah. So in that sense, I mean, in that sense, you never know. It could break, but all the ways Bitcoin could break, I think that the shelling process, the consensus process, is actually pretty robust, at least for those kind of problems. There are some problems where it isn't robust, but I think it's pretty good at spanking the people who don't get with the consensus.
It is a good spanking, or it could just be the birth of a new coin. Like,
I was going to say. I mean, I wouldn't be massively against that. In a way, I kind of want to see a resolution to this, right? I kind of don't want to see an ambiguous outcome here. I'm speaking personally. That I'm sure. I don't think I've occasionally said this on Reddit, and I don't think anybody else who likes big blocks agrees with me. But kind of my own opinion, I'd just like to see a resolution. I'd like to see either Bitcoin is going to scale as far as it reasonably can, reasonably fast. It's going to try and be important in payments, or it's going to try and be a backbone settlement system, and it's not going to scale very big for a long time. If it's the first one, fair enough. We're going to do the payment system thing somewhere else, and let's stop. Guys like Ken and Roger, who are going pretty much door to door and hassling everybody they meet and telling them about Bitcoin and telling them they should take Bitcoin in their shop. They can go and tell them something else. It's all the same technology. It's all fine. It's maybe a bit embarrassing to go back and say I said Bitcoin, but now it's the new thing. But that's all okay. Like they can deal with that. So that wouldn't be a disastrous outcome. Also, I think that now I'm a little bit skeptical that the store of value is actually going to hold in that situation where people aren't doing useful payments with it. But people disagree. Fair enough. If they want to do that, fair enough. Alternatively, if we want to scale it up, I think Gavin's proposal is reasonable and conservative and not going to blow things up. If we do that, I think it's all it's going to be fine, and we can carry on doing it that way. And maybe some of the people who do want a kind of a mega sort of a for example, some people aren't happy with a lot of people trusting people to use SPV, and some people think that everybody should run their own node. And obviously, the way Bitcoin's going, it's not practical for everybody to run their own node. So maybe they want to, at that point, they want to make their own thing and have a currency with high transaction fees, but that's very, very small and anybody can run a full node, and very radically decentralized in that way. And in a sense, I think politically, those two things kind of defend each other. Because a bit of the conversation we didn't get to is that I think that scaling fast and doing a lot of payments is very important in protecting Bitcoin against political attack. Right? That's how the internet works. Is having this basic core infrastructure where the same infrastructure that you use for talking to dissidents or for leaking WikiLeaks, that's the same infrastructure that people use for sharing cat photos, right? And for doing business. I think that's a really important anti-censorship strategy, to have a lot of legal voting people doing normal economic business with your thing. I think that makes it a lot harder to ban and a lot harder to attack. There's an alternative that says instead of making that, instead of making people who think we have to make serious compromises, instead of scaling up and making these compromises, there are people who think we should keep it small so that it's very practically difficult to censor because everybody's got their own node and you can't even detect my own node because it's only doing a tiny bit of traffic and it hardly does anything when you get a new block, so you can't watch the bandwidth go like this, right? You know, and you're secure that way. You're secure through technical means and not through kind of political success and economic success. And those are kind of, with Bitcoin, you kind of have to pick one or the other. But if we did have a proper schism and we did have both those things in existence, then they kind of support each other. Because if you've got this thing that's very economically successful, then that prevents people from making laws that would apply to both of them. But also, if you buy the argument that the other one is very censorship proof, I'm not sure it is, but if you buy that argument, then if they were to ban the big scale up one, if somebody tried to make an attack on that one or to censor that one, everybody can just move their traffic to the little one. So that makes it less useful to make these attacks on, you know, the one that people are using for payments. Yep. So I kind of would like to see both these things exist in the world. And I can understand that people who want the little one don't want Bitcoin to be that one, you know, and people who want the other one obviously want Bitcoin to be theirs. So I'm kind of not adverse to us just having a fight and a schism, and then just making two things, and then just kind of splitting the network effect up. I don't quite think it's ideal, but I wouldn't be astonishingly upset if that happened. It might work out for the best. I don't know.
I guess in summary, I kind of feel the same thing in theory. I actually believe it more strongly than you. I think it should be two separate coins. Yeah. What I think I disagree is I don't think it would work very nicely if it started as a fork of Bitcoin because of just the problem of everything, ports and everything. So
that's right. And also because whichever one doesn't have the brand and the network effect, whichever one doesn't have those things, could actually have a new design that would be a lot better.
Yeah, maybe. But let's see.
We've learned a lot since, you know, there are a lot of changes that you can't make backwards compatible, you know.
Exactly. But I really don't worry too much about them. I don't believe in one coin in the world.
Right.
Coin is just like it's so easily replicatable. Now, no coin has actually successfully bootstrapped themselves up to the level of Bitcoin yet. So we have yet to see whether or not it's possible. So that's what a lot of people think.
Yeah.
Maybe incorrectly assuming that there could only be one coin worth value. My future view is I kind of see Bitcoin as like the money in my vault. Now let's imagine the future without banks for a second. Let's play this hypothetical situation in the world where there are no actual public banks anymore. It is tried, but let's assume that that's the case. If that's the case, then what replaces what we think of as a bank, where we vault all our money? Let's just say it is Bitcoin now. It's virtual, so it could be on paper, it could be my hard wallet, whatever. That's where I keep my entire life savings is Bitcoin. Now I don't walk around with my entire life savings in my wallet. I take out from the bank $100, $500 a week, and I put it in my wallet.
Yeah.
That wallet is another coin. That wallet could be Bitcoin XD coin, which is successfully forked out, or it could be Litecoin, whatever. I don't see there's any barrier to adoption of a coin like that. Once Bitcoin has decided, like it needs to decide, what are we? If Bitcoin decides to be the payment coin, then there will be a coin that will be the gold coin, the vault coin, the bank, all my money coin, because nobody is going to want to put all their life savings on Bitcoin anymore. I guarantee you. Satoshi will probably move those coins to the new Litecoin or Bitcoin.
Well, I guess it goes. Yeah, I guess that's true if we consider Gavin's thing to be kind of a compromise, and if we think that the payment coin is going to scale a lot bigger.
Yeah,
I can see.
I mean, but they are kind of like diverging views. I mean, you want to scale us, like crazy amount of transactions, which is kind of. I mean, we want to do that now, but we're always careful because we have to worry about being decentralization and kind of a little bit government resistant. So would it be nicer if we just had one coin which was only that, and everybody recognized it only for that, and the other coin?
Yeah. Well, although I think that, to have an interesting payment system, you still need all those properties. You still need decentralization and government resistance, because the reason why
but it'd be less
you can make the payment cheap is because nobody is in charge of it. You know. However, it may be that you can do things like proof of stake, that have slightly different security properties that would work okay for the payment thing. So yeah. I think I agree. I'm certainly not against a schism. If a schism, at least I don't think I'm for a schism, but if it happened, it might work out well.
Yeah, and this is so I agree with you there. I don't fear a schism. I just fear the chaotic time which a schism will bring, because I don't think anybody's prepared of how to like separate the Siamese twins if they split.
Yeah, well, I think that works okay. I think so. Here's how I see it. Are we all right for time? We've gone to
yeah. Let's try to wrap up. But yeah,
I'll just finish.
My last point is.
You want to make a point? Yeah.
My last point is just very simply that's why I'm kind of betting on sidechains. It's not ready yet, but when sidechains are around, then we can port value from one chain to another without having to go.
No, but seriously, if you read Greg Maxwell's stuff on this, it doesn't. If you're doing a sidechain with Bitcoin, at least if you do merge mining, which is the obvious way to do it because you need mining, then you just it's just the same as scaling Bitcoin from the point of view of decentralization.
I think we just have new miners on the other side. We have new miners. I mean, if we clearly had like a coin which was linked to Bitcoin, but was, say, for Starbucks, like this is Starbucks like what you can buy coffee with this, or buy Amazon coin. Then I guarantee you miners will pop up for Amazon coin.
How do you? But I mean, if the coin wants to use merge mining, which they probably do, and the miners want to do merge mining, which they probably do because they get money, right? How would you stop them doing that?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it enough. I'll have to study more about sidechains when they get more data out on it.
Yeah.
I only had.
So a lot of the people who are working on them anyway don't think that they're a scaling solution, except to the extent that you can try new ideas that you're scared to try on Bitcoin.
Right.
And it might be that those new ideas gives you ways that you can scale Bitcoin. Yeah. Anyhow, okay. Shall we?
No, you wanted to finish your thought?
Oh, what were we talking about? I forgot what my thought was. No, it's gone. I'm sorry.
Cool. We totally hogged the thing. Did Aya and
Yeah, Aya. What do you think? Aya's going to like a monologue for 40 minutes now. Is Aya there? I don't know.
She probably.
I have some question.
Yeah.
I still hope that core developer will build a consensus. So it's not healthy to continue this kind of civil war. So I do hope that somehow Gavin will agree with Greg Maxwell and Adam Back and Peter Todd and other core developer. Do you think it's going to be optimistic to have such consensus building?
I don't know. I think what's most likely to happen, I think that XT will, I think that Core will probably come up with some kind of proposal, but that doesn't really do much to make Bitcoin scale up very big, at least in the short term. And that will be enough probably to kill XT. I don't think they have to do much to kind of kill the momentum for XT. So I think the most likely thing is kind of that they don't come to an agreement, or they come to an agreement, but it's a very small change, but that it doesn't end the discussion, and that people who want to scale will be dissatisfied, and probably some of those will leak off to another coin. That's my best guess, but who knows, you know.
Well, there's always Ethereum.
Well, that's no. I mean, seriously, have you played with it at all? yeah, I just had just been messing around with it because I never spent any time on it because I never thought they'd launch. And I was right for a long time in my defense.
Yeah, you're right.
But then they did, and it's quite an impressive piece of work. You know, so if Bitcoin said that I think that's certainly a I mean, and they haven't really they've nailed their own plans for, they wanted to switch to proof of stake, but they haven't worked out exactly how, and they have plans for scaling, but it's all a bit vague. So maybe they aren't ready for this, but I kind of feel like, you know, maybe if Bitcoin wants to be you know, digital gold, and Ethereum wants to be big scale up thing, that would be kind of cool as an outcome. You know, but we'll see. I don't think it's in Bitcoin's interests for that to happen, at least in terms of valuation.
If you don't mind, I have one just sort of last question for you guys, if there's time. So you both seem to have very well-informed opinions about scalability and whatnot. I'm just wondering if either of you, what are you planning on doing to actually move forward with your opinion? Are you just writing about it, or are any of you in contact with any of the core developers? Are you organizing any sort of effort to help inform the public, or what's, or just a sidelines watching from the stands type of thing? No,
I'm just wasting time on Twitter every now and then. I'm not doing anything useful whatsoever in terms of or I'm not testing anything. I'm not simulating anything or doing anything useful. Yeah, I'm just working on reality keys and actually working on Ethereum right now. That's what I spend.
I guess that's, to a lesser extent, I'm just pretty much you know, making sure I educate everybody. There's a lot of FUD from both sides. It's you have to cut through it with a knife. It's so thick. So I'm just doing my part in trying to educate people, and I guess I do. I don't contact directly with the core devs, but I do, you know, I do share tweets with them every so often. What because I kind of see, like, I think we already hashed out the whole, you know, forking and the whole, you know, block size issue. My focus right now is trying to, like, get core devs, Gavin, Mike included, and everybody just to somehow agree on a sort of a change process, because the BIP process is sufficient as a small team, you know, software development team, but you know, now it's kind of like Mt. Gox. You know, they started off as a stupid Magic the Gathering card trading application. All of a sudden, holy crap, we're like moving hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's when they realized, oops, we actually don't have the processes, corporate process, accounting processes, reconciliation processes, anything able to handle this. I think we're starting to get to that point, and I think that's kind of the bigger issue here. So I'm less worried about what happens with the fork, more worried about what the fork means in terms of governance, because it's kind of like, well, because it's a blank slate, and that's why Gavin is totally fine. Like, hey, let's just hard fork it. And people are like, okay, you're not supposed to do that. Well, where does it say I'm not supposed to do that? Okay, you're right. So there's nobody's right here, and nobody knows. So I think they kind of, like, regardless of their opinions on block size limit, I think they need to sit down and decide, like, guys, going forward, how are we going to handle this stuff? Because obviously everybody come up with a solution and they get everybody else to agree with it is just not going to work. I mean, that won't scale. That's the bigger scalability problem here. It's not like block size scalability, because we actually don't have transactions busting the limit yet.
Right.
The scalability issue is that core devs cannot come to consensus, because the only rule they have is everybody needs to agree. If you don't agree, all right, make your own coin. Okay, well then I mean, that's just not going to work. So I think I have some ideas. I wrote an article on it, but we'll see how the devs maybe like it or not like it. I encourage more people to think about, like, we need more governance. And unfortunately, I'm fighting a lot of, like, arguments from libertarians who believe that, you know, or anarchists who believe that no rules are the best rules. Well, I think even anarchy has rules. It just means there's no government and state, but there are still our rules, and I think we do need a set of rules if we're going to navigate these disagreements in the future.
Well, one thing to add to that is that it's very unfortunate that people have been kind of trying to block communication channels to.
Yes, absolutely. There should
and
be
very clear examples on both sides that that people who are in favor of an increase would kind of quite ruthlessly vote down on Reddit, right? People who were on the other side of the argument. And then you've got stuff outright censored from whole Reddits, and this is very bad. And the problem is that people just get into this kind of, it's not just that they can't get to an agreement with each other, but also that people get in their own kind of echo chambers. And I think so. One of the problems I think in the way Bitcoin people are seeing this right now, that we were talking about before, how maybe people aren't quite aware of both the possibilities and the threats. I think of some of the things like Ethereum and some of the other non-Bitcoin choices in the space. And part of that is that they are censored. And I didn't even realize, it didn't occur to me, but that in our Bitcoin you couldn't post about the launch of Ethereum. Right now, I think it would have been useful to know that this was going on and what was happening and what are the what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, what are the insights, what are the mistakes they're making. I think it would have been good for Bitcoin people to have that conversation. And the same goes with this one, where now you've got all this stuff is getting squished from Bitcoin Talk and from the normal Reddit. So now you've got this. So now if I look at Reddit, I have this amazingly kind of long URL string, because you can kind of put things together with a plus, right? So you can put like Bitcoin, and it makes your own like your multi-Reddit where it combines all these things together, right? So I have to read like Bitcoin plus Bitcoin uncensored plus Bitcoin XT plus BTC plus Buttcoin plus Ethereum. I think there's a couple of others, and then the other thing I've been doing to try and figure out what's going on is to just have a kind of a list of people I like to read with various opinions, and just go to their comments and read their comments. Because it's very hard for looking at any one of those forums, you would get such a limited view of what's going on, But I really think the people involved, it would really be useful to sort that out and stop doing all that stupid shit.
Yeah, I agree. Censorship is bad. It's anti-Bitcoin. There's no censorship. Cool.
I have one question. What is the worst scenario that it could be happened? Or the most Bitcoin users have to right to vote this method, so we prepared a bad scenario. What do you think?
The worst scenario is that we have a little temporary agreement and we never resolve what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin carries on blocking payments, basically getting just enough of the mindshare in payments without scaling to do payments. That's the worst scenario.
Yeah, I agree. We have to decide what Bitcoin is. The problem is Bitcoin was everything. It's kind of a mirror on the way Satoshi did it, right? He built one client, which is like the client, the server, the
right.
Qt client, the miner, and a freaking wallet, like all jammed into one. So I mean, this is the same thing. It's slowly getting pulled apart, but idealistically, we're at the point where Bitcoin was both either touted as a payment system for the world, and at the same time touted as like your hedge against fiat currencies and governments and your safe money. We kind of need to decide which one has a higher priority. And once we decide which one has a higher priority, then we can let another alternative have the exact opposite priority, and that could be like the twin of Bitcoin, or the contrapositive of Bitcoin, which it will complement it, kind of thing. And I think when we get to that point, we'll be good. But if we don't, like Edmund said, then we're just going to keep on wandering and banging our heads against the wall and not really knowing where we're going. Is that what you meant, or did you mean like technically in a hard fork, what would happen? What would be a worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is Bitcoin goes to zero price. That's the worst case scenario. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's highly unlikely. All right. Should we wrap up?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Please.
Oh, please, Jimmy, you can wrap up. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I think that this dialogue, this conversation will influence positively. So this will avoid FUD. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.